My name is Eva Morales. I'm 42 years old, and until yesterday, I was the senior strategy consultant at Hartley Knox, a boutique management firm in Chicago. I'd been with the company for 11 years. 11. Through mergers, leadership changes, recessions, and rebrands. I wasn't just a name on the payroll. I was one of the architects. The person they called when a deal was falling apart. The person who held the line when clients were ready to walk. Yesterday morning, I walked into the conference room expecting a handshake and maybe a quiet toast. Instead, I found my boss, Dean Harper, already seated at the far end of the long glass table, a thin white folder placed carefully in front of him. "Eva," he said, standing as I entered. His tone was gentle, too gentle, the way you'd talk to someone at a funeral. "Thanks for coming in early." I'd just saved a $20 million contract. 3 weeks of working late into the night, flying back and forth between Dallas and San Francisco, talking a hesitant client off a ledge after a supply chain collapse nearly tanked their expansion plans. My efforts hadn't just closed the deal. They'd prevented the client from walking entirely. Everyone in the office knew it. So when I sat down and saw the way Dean's eyes refused to meet mine, I felt it. A tension in the air. The subtle shift of something I couldn't yet name. He folded his hands. "You've done well, truly, but we're moving toward younger and fresher energy." The words barely registered. "I'm sorry?" I asked, not because I hadn't heard him, but because the phrase was so rehearsed it felt like something he'd pulled from a bad HR training video. Dean slid the folder across the table. "We're restructuring. New leadership wants a leaner team, more aggressive growth strategies. You've been a tremendous asset, Eva. But it's time for a new chapter." I opened the folder slowly, reading the legal jargon through a blur I refused to let him see. Termination agreement, severance, non-disparagement clause. I looked up. "Effective immediately?" He nodded. "You'll still get this quarter's bonus, and of course we'll ensure a respectful transition." Respectful. As if blindsiding someone after 11 years was respectful. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice or demand an explanation. I smiled. A small, measured thing. "Understood," I said calmly and extended my hand. Dean seemed almost relieved as he shook it, like he'd been afraid I'd make a scene. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. Because in that moment, what washed over me wasn't rage, it was clarity. A cold, sharp kind of clarity. The kind that comes when a long illusion finally shatters. He didn't know. Not yet. He had no idea how fun the next day would be. I packed my desk slowly, methodically. Not because I needed the time, but because I wanted the time. I wanted to see the way people looked at me when they realized I was leaving. Not with pity, but confusion. No announcement had been made yet. Most assumed I was heading to a client site. A few waved. Only one person stopped to ask. "Going on vacation?" My assistant, Priya, asked, glancing at the box in my hand. "Something like that," I said. I paused for a moment at the corner window where I'd spent so many late nights. From here, you could see the lake, the skyline, the cranes still building things no one really needed. I'd worked through holidays in this office, missed birthdays, stayed during snowstorms. All for what? Respect? Loyalty? Clearly, those were currencies Hartley and Knox no longer traded in. I took one last look at the whiteboard in my office. Notes from a call with our biggest client, Cascade Systems. The same client I'd just saved with a strategy Dean had initially called too risky. The client who'd personally thanked me on a call 2 nights ago and mentioned flying into Chicago next week to discuss a longer contract. He didn't know I'd been let go yet. And that was my leverage. I walked out without fanfare. No goodbye speech, no farewell cake. Just a quiet exit and a phone full of contacts I'd built from nothing. At home that night, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. I reviewed my contract again. The non-compete clause was there, but narrow. 6 months and only binding if I left voluntarily. Dean had signed my termination. That made all the difference. I pulled up my personal files. Copies of the presentations, the notes, the work I'd done off hours to save that $20 million deal. Not company property. Just thoughts, strategies, ideas they'd dismissed until they saw them work. And then I opened my inbox. There it was. A message from Cascade's VP of Operations. Looking forward to sitting down with you next week, Eva. Want to discuss long-term alignment. You've been instrumental to our success. Thank you again. I didn't reply. Not yet. I had other things to do first, like making tomorrow unforgettable. I woke up the next morning before my alarm, even though I hadn't set one. Old habits. My body still expected a morning check-in, a commute, a calendar full of project calls. But the space was quiet now. My home felt different. Not like a prison, but like a blank canvas. I made coffee slowly, intentionally. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing. No power suit, no laptop bag by the door, no endless Slack notifications. Just me, the kitchen window, and a phone that hadn't stopped buzzing since I left the office yesterday. I scrolled through the notifications, 5 LinkedIn messages from former colleagues, 2 emails from clients, one of them Cascade, a voicemail from Julia, one of our partner liaisons. Heard something happened? Please call me when you can. They were confused, because firing someone who just saved your largest contract doesn't make sense, unless you don't know what she really did. I sat down with my notebook, the one I never left at the office, the one that had every client quirk, side conversation, and internal promise no one else documented. Over 11 years, I hadn't just serviced accounts. I'd earned trust. I knew which VPs had kids applying to college, which procurement directors had vendor allergies, who preferred Monday meetings and who wanted Thursday briefings. I wasn't just a consultant. I was the connective tissue. And they'd cut me out like a benign mole. They thought my value ended with that folder Dean slid across the table. They were wrong. At 9 a.m., sharp, I called Cascade Systems. Not the general line, not the customer service number. I called the cell phone of Alex Garner, the VP who'd messaged me about the meeting next week. He answered on the second ring. Eva, hey, are we still good for Tuesday? There it was, the opportunity. I wanted to talk to you about that, I said calmly. As of yesterday, I'm no longer with Hartley Knox. There was silence on the line, the kind where you can almost hear someone's eyebrows lift. Wait, what? I was let go, I explained, keeping my tone neutral. The firm's shifting direction. They're leaning into younger talent, different leadership. I just wanted you to hear it from me directly. That's unbelievable, he said. You're the only reason we didn't walk away from the deal last month. You salvaged everything. I appreciate that, Alex. I really do. What happens now? Who's taking over your accounts? I imagine Dean will reach out, or maybe someone from their new team. I don't have visibility into that anymore. He went quiet again. Eva, let me ask you this. Are you staying in the industry? Yes, I said without hesitation. I'm just not sure where yet. I want to talk. Not about Tuesday's meeting. About something else. Something long-term. Can you meet today? A smile crept across my face. Absolutely. We met at a quiet bistro in the West Loop. No suits, no pitch decks, just 2 people with too much unspoken context between them. He got straight to the point. We've been looking at internalizing some of our strategic work, Alex said. Consulting bills are through the roof, and frankly, the only person we've consistently trusted at H&K was you. You ever consider going independent? That word hung in the air. Independent. For 11 years, I'd operated like a one-woman firm under someone else's banner. I built systems, closed deals, and maintained relationships they couldn't replicate. And they let me go because I didn't fit the new energy. I looked Alex in the eye. If I went independent, would Cascade be open to discussing a direct advisory agreement? He didn't even pause. Draft something. Let's make it real. That evening, I opened my laptop and began building something I hadn't thought about in years. My own name, my own offering, my own identity as more than just someone who worked for a firm. I registered an LLC, booked a meeting with a small business attorney I'd met years ago through a client mixer. He owed me a favor. I called Priya, my former assistant, and asked if she was open to part-time freelance work. Her answer, say when. By 9 p.m., I had a name, a legal structure, and a plan. I wasn't just going to land on my feet. I was going to build something Dean would never understand, because what I had wasn't tied to Hartley and Knox's logo or their pitch decks. It was me, my reputation, my results, my clients. They didn't follow slides or brand colors. They followed trust. And the next day, that trust would begin to move. Contract by contract, name by name. The morning sun came through the windows with a strange kind of clarity. Sharp, bold, unapologetic. I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee and a notepad full of names. Not just names, but people. Relationships. Conversations that had spanned years, forged in late-night calls, crisis meetings, and problem-solving sessions that had nothing to do with hourly billing. I wasn't in a rush. Each call mattered. Each one had to feel intentional, not desperate. My first call wasn't to a client. It was to someone who knew how the game worked. Someone who used to be a mentor but had long since become a friend. Eva, said Roberta Sanchez, her voice warm but alert. I heard the news through the grapevine. Dean's making some bold moves. That's one way to put it, I said. He let me go. Said the firm needs younger energy. There was a pause. He actually said that? Verbatim. She exhaled. Wow, you're kidding. Nope. Then he's just handed you a gift. You realize that, right? I did. I'm starting something of my own, I told her. Nothing flashy yet, but Cascade's already expressed interest. They want to be my first client. Roberta laughed. Of course they do. You practically rebuilt their Western division yourself. What do you need from me? Advice, and eventually a referral. But right now, just this. If people start asking where I landed, what would you say? I'd say Hartley and Knox just lit the match that's going to burn their client list to the ground, she said. I'll vouch for you, Eva. Whenever, wherever. The conversation grounded me. It reminded me that my career hadn't been built on handouts or office politics. It had been built on results and trust. I hung up, took a deep breath, and dialed my first client. It was Darren McBride from Easton Data Partners. I'd managed their account for 7 years, handled their first merger, helped them navigate a brutal cybersecurity incident, and recently advised them through their expansion into European markets. He answered on the third ring. Eva, I was just thinking of calling you. We've got that international call coming up. Still on for Tuesday? I swallowed. That's actually what I'm calling about. I'm no longer with Hartley and Knox. A beat of silence. Wait, what? Effective 2 days ago. Company directions changing. I was let go. Darren sounded stunned. Eva, that's insane. You've been our point person forever. You know our whole infrastructure. I wanted to let you know personally before the company did. I don't know who'll be taking over your account. Whoever it is, they won't know what you know. This is a problem. There is one thing I can say, I added. I'm starting a private consultancy. Small, personal, selective. You taking clients? Only the ones I believe in. He didn't miss a beat. Send me a proposal by tomorrow. By the end of the day, I'd made 6 more calls. Each one a deliberate conversation. Each one met with the same reaction. Confusion, concern, and then interest. They weren't just surprised I was gone. They were surprised the firm had let me go without a plan. Because there was no plan. Hartley and Knox hadn't just removed me from projects. They'd severed the relationships those projects depended on. And now, quietly and respectfully, I was reclaiming what they'd cast aside. That night, I received a text from Priya, my former assistant. Priya. Internal chaos. Julia says Dean's scrambling. Apparently, 2 clients have already requested new account managers. One said they're reevaluating the partnership. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message, letting it sink in. The wheels were turning faster than I expected. I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop again. I had a logo designer on Fiverr working on a basic brand identity. I didn't need much. Just something clean, professional, trustworthy. Eva Morales Consulting. Simple, elegant, director. I set up a meeting scheduler, drafted my first NDA, customized a service proposal template. I wasn't just collecting clients. I was laying the groundwork for something real, something lasting. And when I opened my inbox, I saw a message from someone I hadn't expected so soon. Subject: Your departure from Alex Garner, Cascade Systems. Eva, just spoke to Dean. He told me Alicia will be our new point of contact. I told him we'll need to think about that. Let's talk tomorrow. I read the message twice. Alicia? The 28-year-old junior consultant Dean had once referred to as a fresh perspective? The one I had to coach through her first client kickoff? Dean had no idea what he'd just triggered. Tomorrow I'd make it clear. By Thursday morning, the fallout had already begun. 2 voicemails, 4 emails, 1 cryptic LinkedIn message from a colleague still inside Hartley Knox. Whatever you did, they're panicking. You okay? I was better than okay. Cascade Systems had requested a hold on all active deliverables. Easton Data had already signed a preliminary letter of intent with me. And 2 smaller firms, clients I hadn't even called yet, had reached out, saying they preferred to work with the person they trusted. This wasn't a rebellion. It was quiet erosion, 1 grain of sand at a time. And it was only the beginning. At 10 a.m., I met Alex Garner from Cascade at their downtown office. Not as a vendor, not as a representative of Hartley Knox, but as myself. He ushered me into a private conference room, shut the door behind us, and folded his arms. So, they really fired you? I nodded. After everything you did for us with the San Diego expansion? Apparently, I didn't align with the new direction, I said evenly. Alex sat down across from me and shook his head in disbelief. They sent us Alicia. She didn't even know our contract terms. She showed up with the wrong deck and called our COO Andrew. His name is Anthony. I almost winced. That was the kind of mistake you didn't recover from. I'm not here to sell you anything, Alex, I said. I just wanted to be transparent. I've started something new. Small. High touch. Focused on legacy clients who value strategy over flash. He leaned forward. How soon can you start? By noon, we'd reviewed the structure of a 6-month advisory contract. Nothing aggressive, just a clean exit from the firm and a transition into something simpler, more direct. They wanted continuity. I was offering it. Without bureaucracy, without delays, and with the same level of attention they were used to. As I left the building, Alex stopped me at the door. You know this is going to cause problems. I know, I said, but I didn't create them. I'm just responding. He gave me a firm nod. For what it's worth, they underestimated you. That part I already knew. Back home, I opened my laptop to find 2 new messages. One was from Hartley and Knox's legal department. Subject: Reminder regarding confidential information. Please be advised that your former employment agreement includes standard confidentiality provisions. Any outreach to current clients must remain in accordance with those terms. It was vague, deliberately vague, designed to intimidate. The second message was from Alicia herself. Subject: Quick question. Hey, Eva, just wanted to ask. Do you remember what doc you used for Cascade's quarterly benchmarking? I couldn't find it in the shared drive. Appreciate any help? I stared at the message. This wasn't her fault. Not really. She was thrown into a role she wasn't ready for, all in the name of fresh energy. Still, I didn't respond. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't turn into a lesson someone else should have taught her. I closed my inbox and texted Priya instead. Eva, let's prep for 2 new client onboardings this week. I'll loop you in with Cascade and Easton Data tomorrow. Priya, on it. Also, heard from Julia again. Dean's losing it. Clients are demanding meetings. COO asked why your name isn't on any internal planning decks anymore. I smiled. That question was going to haunt them for a while. Later that afternoon, I took a walk through Lincoln Park to clear my head. The lake was calm. The city hummed around me, full of people moving through their routines, unaware that one small shift was rippling through a high-rise office not far from here. At 4:17 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Eva Morales, I answered. A pause. Then, Eva, it's Gerald Mercer, COO at Hartley Knox. I raised an eyebrow. Hi, Gerald. How can I help you? We've had some client concerns. A few transitions aren't going as smoothly as hoped. I wanted to see if you'd be open to a consulting arrangement to help support the handoffs. Just for a few weeks. I kept my tone polite, neutral. Unfortunately, I'm already under contract with 2 former clients. It wouldn't be appropriate. Eva, we don't want this to escalate. It won't. As long as the firm respects my termination and my rights under the agreement we both signed. Another pause. Right, he said finally. Well, thank you for your time. I ended the call and sat down on a bench overlooking the lake. That was their first warning shot. The first attempt to regain control. But what they didn't understand was this. I hadn't burned any bridges. I'd simply built a better one and the clients were already crossing it. By Friday morning, I had 4 clients. Cascade Systems, Easton Data, Langford and Reese, and now Bexley Bio. None of them had been approached. None had been pressured. All had reached out after hearing the same question echo through the industry. What happened to Eva Morales? I hadn't needed to sell myself. I had simply answered when they called. Calmly, factually, professionally. I'm no longer with Hartley and Knox. I've started a consulting firm. Yes, I'm open to continuing our work, independently. Simple truths. But inside Hartley and Knox, those truths were causing chaos. That morning, Priya forwarded me another message from Julia. Subject: internal status. Dean called an emergency meeting this morning. At least 5 clients have paused renewals or asked for new points of contact. Legal is trying to figure out if they can enforce the non-solicit clause, but since you were terminated, there's a lot of confusion. COO is not happy. Neither is the board. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. I wasn't looking to destroy the firm. I wasn't trying to make headlines, but I also wasn't going to apologize for being the thing they underestimated most: indispensable. At 11:30 a.m., I received a calendar invite from Dean Harper. Subject: let's catch up, just us. Time: 3 p.m. Location: Hartley and Knox, conference room 6B. The audacity. I didn't accept. I didn't decline. Instead, I spent the next hour reviewing every section of my termination letter again. There it was, in plain legal language. The company waives any non-compete enforcement in the event of involuntary termination. They'd signed it. They'd filed it. They just hadn't read it closely enough. At 1:12 p.m., my phone rang again. It was Alex from Cascade. Hey, just a heads up, he said. Dean reached out this morning, said you were creating confusion and that our contract might expose us to legal action. I blinked. He actually said that? Yep. I asked him to send it in writing. He backpedaled pretty fast after that. I smiled. Thanks for letting me know. No problem. Also, 2 colleagues at Emblem Tech are looking for help. They were asking who's advising us now. You okay with me sharing your info? You kidding? I said. Absolutely. By 2:30 p.m., I was on a Zoom call with Emblem Tech's Director of Strategy. They were restructuring and had just fired their previous consulting firm due to misalignment. We spoke for 40 minutes. She said she'd have a draft contract by Monday. When I ended the call, I saw that I had a new voicemail. Dean. I listened. Eva, this is Dean. I'd really appreciate a moment to speak today. Not about the past, about alignment. There may be a way for us to move forward that benefits everyone. I deleted it. Because alignment was the word he used when he pushed me out. And now he wanted it back. At 4:05 p.m., Julia called me from her personal number. Eva, she said quickly. You didn't hear this from me, but Veriton Capital backed out. That caught my attention. Excuse me? The private equity group that was courting Hartley and Knox. It was hush-hush, but they'd been in talks for months. They had conditions, wanted to see strong client retention and continuity. With you gone and this fallout spreading, they pulled the offer this morning. I sat back, stunned. That's what this was about, I whispered. They never said it, Julia replied. But yeah, they were trying to make the firm look streamlined, remove perceived bottlenecks, consolidate power. You were too connected to too many clients. So they cut me loose, I said softly, thinking the clients would stay behind. Except they didn't. No, I said. They didn't. That night, I made one final call. To Gerald Mercer, the COO who had warned me not to escalate. He answered on the second ring. Eva. I heard about Veriton, I said. Must have been a tough call. A pause. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. I'm not doing anything you didn't plan first. You gambled, you lost. I just stepped out of the way and let it fall. He sighed. You could come back. We could... No, I interrupted. You had 11 years to value what I built. And you traded it for a younger face and a cheaper signature. It's done. He said nothing. I continued. Tell Dean I won't be at his 3 o'clock meeting. I have my own clients now. And unlike yours, they trust me. Then I hung up. 3 weeks after I was fired, my name was on more client contracts than Hartley and Knox's top 3 consultants combined. It didn't happen because I asked. It happened because people chose. And not because of pity or protest, but because I delivered results. Because I answered calls after 8 p.m., remembered details that didn't fit in CRM systems, and made sure they didn't have to explain themselves twice. Trust doesn't come with a logo. It comes with consistency. And they finally saw the difference. By the second month, my LLC had grown faster than I'd anticipated. Too fast, honestly. Priya was now full-time, and I'd just onboarded another project coordinator, Marcus, a sharp, kind soul I'd mentored years ago and who left the corporate grind 6 months earlier. We worked from a small co-working space in River North. No glass corner offices, no boardroom views, just 3 desks, great coffee, and quiet efficiency. Cascade renewed for a full year. Easton added a second project. Emblin signed a 3-month strategic engagement with a verbal intent to expand. And the emails kept coming. Subject: referral from Alex Garner. Subject: are you still taking clients? Subject: can we talk? Need someone I can trust. I turned down more business than I accepted. Not out of arrogance, but intention. I wasn't building an empire. I was building something sustainable. Something mine. Something they couldn't take from me again. Then one morning, I opened LinkedIn and saw the news. Hartley and Knox announces leadership transition. Dean Harper will step down as managing director effective immediately. Interim leadership will be appointed as the firm enters a restructuring phase following key client losses. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not with satisfaction, not with triumph. Just stillness. He was gone. Just like that. The man who told me I was no longer the right energy for the firm. The man who thought he could replace trust with charisma. The man who handed me a folder across a polished table, assuming I'd walk away quietly and vanish into irrelevance. He never saw it coming. Because men like Dean never do. That afternoon, I received an envelope by courier. No return address. Inside was a single handwritten note. Eva, you were right. They weren't just your clients. They were your relationships. And I never understood the difference. I hope you build something better than we ever did. You already have. Dean, I folded the note once and placed it in my drawer. Not out of sentimentality, but closure. Some lessons don't need a response. 3 days later, I stood at a podium at the Women in Leadership Summit, a conference I'd once only attended from the back row. Now I was the closing speaker. The topic? When value isn't seen and why it doesn't matter. I told the story plainly. No bitterness, no revenge tone. Just facts. I spoke about what happens when companies chase image over impact, when they measure freshness by age instead of insight, when they trade consistency for flash. I ended with this. You may one day find yourself across a table from someone who no longer sees your worth. Don't panic. Don't beg. Just smile, shake their hand, and walk out with everything they never knew you built. Your name, your reputation, your principles. Because some things aren't printed on business cards. They're etched in people's trust. The applause was long, standing even. But what mattered more was what happened after. 6 women approached me with tears in their eyes. 2 asked to mentor under me. One was planning her exit from a firm that had been draining her for years. Another offered to invest if I ever considered scaling. And one, a quiet woman in her 50s, just said, "Thank you. I needed that." I nodded. Me too. That night, back in my apartment, I poured a glass of red wine and watched the city through the window. Same skyline, same streets, but everything had changed. Not because I won, but because I no longer needed to. I'd outgrown the rooms that once tried to shrink me, and the people who once defined me now watched from the sidelines, trying to understand how they lost so much by letting go of just one person. I pulled out the quote Priya had framed for me the day I signed my 6th client. The best revenge is doing exactly what they thought you never could. I placed it on the shelf behind my desk. Not as a warning, as a reminder. Because the world doesn't reward noise. It rewards value. And I was finally in a place where mine would never be questioned again.